Before I say this prayer, I want to tell you what a dilemma I'm in. I'm supposed to be a follower of Jesus, so I'm commanded to pray for my enemies and for those who persecute me. I wish he hadn't said that. I wish he hadn't said a lot of the things that he said, because my life would be simpler. For starters, I would not be doing what I'm about to do, and I think you know what that means. Let's bow our heads together. Lord of life, I pray this morning for the President-elect of the United States, Donald Trump. He is about to inherit the world's most important, difficult, and dangerous job. May he be appropriately overwhelmed, Lord, at what he will now be asked to do. May he be open to the wisdom of those who understand public service and how complicated and thankless it can be. May he be humbled by how much more complex it is to be president than to run for president. May his family learn to accept and to support all kinds of people who do not look like them. May he seek counsel from people who are smarter than he is, and may he listen to people who disagree with him. When he moves into the People's House on Pennsylvania Avenue, may some of the graciousness and patience and eloquence of his predecessor have its way with him. May he learn to renounce violence, seek worthiness in the face of the other, and be a president for all the people. We stand ready to give the benefit of the doubt, but also, if necessary, to resist. Both are forms of prayer. Hear our prayer, O Lord. Amen. I'm reading from the prophet Isaiah, something ironically called a new creation. For I am about to create new heavens and a new earth. The former things shall not be remembered or come to mind, but be glad and rejoice forever in what I am creating. For I am about to create Jerusalem as a joy and its people as a delight. I will rejoice in Jerusalem and delight in my people. No more shall the sound of weeping be heard in it, or the cry of distress. No more shall there be in it an infant that lives but a few days, or an old person who does not live out a lifetime. For one who dies at 100 years will be considered a youth, or one who falls short of 100 will be considered accursed. They shall build houses and inhabit them. They shall plant vineyards and eat their fruit. They shall not build and another inhabit. They shall not plant and another eat. For like the days of a tree shall the days of my people be, and my chosen shall long enjoy the work of their hands. They shall not labor in vain or bear children for calamity, for they shall be offspring blessed by the Lord, and their descendants as well. Before they call, I will answer. While they're yet speaking, I will hear. The wolf and the lamb shall feed together. The lion shall eat straw like the ox, but the serpent, its food shall be dust. They shall not hurt or destroy on all my holy mountain, says the Lord. Here ends this reading, inspired by God. May God grant to us wisdom and courage for interpretation. I have dreaded this moment as much as I've dreaded any sermon in my whole life. Most of my colleagues in the ministry have told me that they are on their third or fourth rewrite of a sermon that does not know where to go. My alma mater, Phillips Theological Seminary, sent out a note of sympathy to all of us who preach. And then they admitted, this was comforting, that nothing they had done to educate us could prepare us to know what in the world to say this morning. Now, whether you're a supporter of the president-elect or like me find him the most unqualified and dangerous man ever to hold the world's highest office, you still don't know what to say to people who sit before you looking for a word of hope, of reassurance, of perspective. So let me begin by telling you why preachers are all sort of caught in limbo this morning. First, intellectual honesty demands that we not normalize what is not normal. We do too much of that, especially in the media. This election has put on full display so much that's broken, angry, and desperate about the American people that it should have been an affront to everything that people of faith or of no faith say they value. How did this man get away with what he said and did and then get elected? So what it feels like to many of us who work in the vineyard of the church, which for good reason is now a kind of clueless antique in the minds of many people, especially young people, although Australia is way ahead of us, is that, we failed once again to speak truth to power in a timely way. We failed the most important test of our lifetime, in part because so many of my colleagues have been told, no politics from the pulpit, no politics from the pulpit, and they believed that meant they could not preach the politics of the gospel, which is a politics of virtue, of orientation toward the other, and of simple human decency. This was never just about politics. It was about the future. It was about our values. It was about women and about girls. It was about the capacity of so many of our neighbors that we do not really know to look away from the clear and present danger of pathological narcissism so long as something else that frightened them more could be defeated. If anyone says they're shocked by the results of the election, it may be because they've not been paying attention for a long, long time. So, this is the first obstacle in the pulpit this morning. We need to be honest about the real fears we are experiencing. I, like many of you, sort of stumbled around through my day on Wednesday in a useless daze, not wanting to talk to anyone, but knowing it was important to say something, anything, to people who were looking for a word of hope. I walked into the Red Cup, and before I could order my coffee, a table full of friends called me over, ordered me over, and said, "What good word do you have for us, Reverend?" I have been interested in and passionate about politics my whole life, not because it's not a mess, and not because the political class reassures me about human nature, but because policies have consequences. Decisions made by politicians make the lives of the people Christ loved better or worse. So I've grown less interested in party labels as I get older and more interested in ideas. Which ones work? Which ones don't? And are you working for the greater good, or are you only in this for yourself? Preachers are supposed to understand this because we're trained to recognize pride as the first of the 7 deadly sins. Self-absorption and ego unchecked, whether that's our own ego or evidence that someone who wants to hold power is in fact a child trapped inside a man's body, desperate to be affirmed and to be loved. We get these men from families where the father was aloof and cruel and never told their sons they loved them, or who gave them a warped definition of success and made it clear, if you fail, I won't love you. We get these men from some mothers who did not hold their children or bond with them, and whose distance left their sons groping, and I do mean literally groping, for the love they did not feel and which they now confuse with conquest. The world is full of such men, but preachers should have warned us not to elect them president. Then, of course, there's this. Evangelical Christians were the largest base of support for Donald Trump. And surprisingly, 52% of white women voted for Trump. And not all of them did so because their husbands told them to. Something else is at work here, albeit inexplicable, that led them to reject what would have been the first female president in U.S. history. Someone who said in an unguarded moment that half of those who supported Trump could be put in a basket of deplorables. And in the world of what media critics call false equivalency, it sounded as if this was a reason to vote instead for a man who said things about women that can't even be spoken aloud in the pulpit. Now, if you find that irrational, welcome to the most irrational election in American history. Or is it? It is only irrational if you are approaching the way we choose our leaders rationally. And this is the other side of what makes it a tough morning for preachers. Many of us don't have a clue what's really going on out there. We don't have a clue. We don't know the level of desperation in small towns where factories and jobs have left in the name of free trade. We don't understand why all the things we view as progress, civil rights, gay rights, progress for women that brought us to the brink of breaking the ultimate glass ceiling, left them somehow feeling forgotten. Now, if Lori was here, she would surely say that when you are privileged, those gains can feel like oppression, and that's right. But that is also what is rational. And not only do uneducated working-class white males not approach their plight rationally these days, but like all human beings, they look for scapegoats, someone to blame, even if it means attaching themselves to a man who gained power by fanning the flames of hatred. We live in this progressive bubble. We exchange Facebook messages about the deplorables, but we don't know them. We haven't talked to them. We have no idea why, given the choice that was before us, so many of them made the choice they did, including quite a few who must not have told the truth to pollsters or even to their own families, but then cast their dissenting vote against all things Washington, D.C. in the privacy of the voting booth. Some of them hated Trump, but they hated the status quo and the world they were living in more. So perhaps a good thing for preachers to say this morning is that we were all wrong. We were wrong, including Trump's people who had resigned themselves to losing and were just as shocked as the rest of us. We all got it wrong. And sometimes there's no more poignant or promising place to be than to wake up and to realize the Tao was right. When you think you know, you do not know. But when you know that you do not know, that is when you know. Now, I know what you're thinking. That the middle class will not be helped by someone who has not demonstrated a shred of capacity to help the middle class, and whose plans include supply side on steroids. But you would be thinking rationally. Or as one of my friends put it, why do people who are struggling financially these days think electing Donald Trump will save them from the Donald Trumps of the world? But then they might say, or from Secretary Clinton, no stranger to Wall Street and business as usual. So where's the hope, preacher man? Where's the hope? You just read words from Isaiah about this glorious new creation, and it doesn't feel that way right now. It feels like the old inglorious one. But did you listen to what makes the dream of Isaiah come true? Infants will not die, unless, of course, they have no health insurance. Everyone will live to be 100. That is, if we find ways to care for and value the elderly. We shall build homes and we shall inhabit them. They are in exile, of course. That is, if no one forecloses on us after our jobs go to Mexico. We will plant vineyards and eat their fruit, that is, if we do not destroy the earth first. As for this nation divided, I wonder what these words mean to those who sit in the pews and listen to them this morning. The wolf and the lamb shall feed together. The lion shall eat straw like the ox, but the serpent, its food shall be dust. Isaiah 65 is the most pro-life passage in the Bible, even though it has nothing to do with abortion. To live is to live together. To turn against one another is to die. And to my colleagues in the ministry, I say, preach that. So here we are, my friends. I have no desire to say anything to just make it all better. As if you don't know enough about the world to know it's a dangerous moment. But let's do this, shall we? Let's hope for the best, and let's give the benefit of the doubt. But if necessary, let's also resist. We can do both these things. You've heard Reagan's line, trust but verify. I want to suggest this for the progressive church, trust but also resist. First of all, we should resist losing all perspective. We do not live in Aleppo, which Gary Johnson should have known, is where children die every day because their own government is dropping barrel bombs on top of them. We don't live there. Let's keep things in perspective. We're not women living in Afghanistan. We're not families about to freeze to death after fleeing from Mosul. Perspective and gratitude are Christian values. Let's practice them. Second, the Constitution provides us with many options that are peaceful and very effective. So there is no red-blooded American anywhere who should not be incensed by efforts to keep some of our citizens from voting. That is shameful. And when anyone tries to restrict our First Amendment rights to free speech, we will resist because we love this country, even if it means warning anyone who will listen that we are losing it. Third, when enough time has passed to persuade many in the Rust Belt that those jobs are not coming back, we're not going to say, I told you so. You voted for that guy. We're going to say, so what can we do that works? As our public schools fall further into the darkness of a society in which the common good is just a quaint idea, we will never, ever, ever give up on the fundamental premise that a decent and affordable education is a right, not a privilege. Education's for everyone because either all of us matter or none of us do. So is health care. Health care is not sort of a consumer good like other consumer goods. It's about being and non-being, and so it can't be left to the marketplace alone. If the president-elect should look away when Russia helps itself to a small country, for example, we will practice spiritual defiance by reminding him we signed a treaty with our European allies that cannot be dismissed by fiat. If there's a move to torture or kill suspected terrorists or their family members, we can resist by citing the Geneva Conventions, something the generals know much more about than the president-elect. Now, if Newt Gingrich should become the replacement for Secretary Clinton, we will insist that it be a force for good, not an enabler of gangsters and oligarchs. If the Affordable Care Act is overturned and 20 million people lose their health insurance, we will resist the idea that nothing should take its place. Rather, we'll insist it should be a public option. Otherwise, the threat of bankruptcy will become again everyone's pre-existing condition. If we lose sight of the most dangerous threat to all of our children, global climate change, because we're being led by a denier or someone beholden to big oil, we're going to resist by putting more and more and more solar panels on our roofs until all our meters spin backwards. And we should respectfully say it now on behalf of that Jesus guy that everybody says they love. The wall will not be built. Repeat, the wall will not be built. Period. I don't care who pays for it. And we will not deport 11 million people who live and work here because we will not live in a police state. And then just to resist doom and gloom, and we're given to doom and gloom, we might remember what people voted for around here in our local elections. Oklahoma, the first state west of the Mississippi, called for Trump at 7:01 p.m. Did you see us light up on the map? It was a proud moment. You know what we did? We actually voted to keep the separation of church and state. We voted. We voted to stop locking up and not trying to rehabilitate nonviolent offenders. We turned down the right to farm, which our farmers already have, 60 to 40, because I guess the Humane Society does not frighten them nearly as much as Chinese hog farmers do. Now, we did keep a clear path to capital punishment, even though more and more people are ready to get rid of it altogether, and it will happen someday. Our beer's going to be stronger and colder. And please drink responsibly. And even though we did not pass the penny sales tax for our kids, that was a hard one for all of us because the tax hurts the poor, but then so does the state of our schools and the loss of our best teachers. So now that blackball's right back in the hands of the legislators, whose egregious failure to fund public education is not going to get bailed out by single moms. They own it. Now, did you know there were stricter gun control laws passed around the country? There's some under-the-radar stuff happening, even in the Wild West, where the NRA spent millions in a losing cause, because even out there in the Wild West, those Second Amendment zealots do not think anyone, no matter how unstable, should have an assault rifle. It's a start. The minimum wage was raised in red states and in blue states, and here's the most important way of all for us to resist. When these jobs don't return to Youngstown, and when new trade deals do not produce more magic than the old ones did, let's be ready to do more for the working class than cut taxes on the corporations that outsource those jobs to begin with and then park their profits in the Bahamas to show how patriotic they really are. My fondest wish about this election is we may be sowing the seeds of a new and renewed Democratic Party, one that actually looks out for working people. Half of us did not vote again, of course, proving that you can sleep through history at your own peril. So here's one preacher's sermon. Trust but resist. Give the benefit of the doubt, but do not surrender your values. Don't look for reasons to say, I told you so. We're not going to hear an anti-Trump sermon for the next 4 years here. I promise you that. We're not going to gloat when something goes wrong. We're going to say, what's a better way? Don't wallow in the valley of progressive despair. Instead, let's just keep on doing what we're already doing, but do it with a new sense of urgency. There's a lot of frightened people out there. They need a friend. So here's one way to respond to the election. You can join the safety pin movement. I've got one on, started in the UK after the Brexit vote, because this is our Brexit vote, and pledge to do more than just be alarmed. You can pledge to be present to people who need us. And here's what it sounds like. If you wear hijab, I will sit with you on the train. If you're a person of color, I'll stand with you if the cops stop you. If you're a person with disabilities, I'll hand you my megaphone. If you're an immigrant, I'll help you find resources. If you're a refugee, I'll make sure you're welcome. If you're a veteran, I'll take up your fight. If you're LGBTQ, I'll remind you that you're beautiful and beloved just the way God made you. If you're a woman, I'll make sure you get home okay. If you're tired, me too. If you need a hug, I've got an unlimited supply. If you need me, I'll be with you. All that I ask is that you be with me too, because together we'll be the strong arm of God. Can we do this, Mayflower? Can we? To quote my favorite president, yes, we can.